it is definitely going to be an excellent time that we are going to have. A very, very good time that we are going to have. So get prepared, get your journal, get your notebooks, if need be, as we get into this. So for those who have been participating in our weekly master classes so far, we have been handling a series that I have received incredible feedback from that particular series. And this is like a roundup to that particular series, but I'll be handling a topic or a focus that kind of looks like an independent, focus, but it is still a very important part of the series that we are looking at. So today we will be focusing on looking at power and especially how power moves across industries and across nations, right? Because as a community of entrepreneurs and professionals, whatever we are building, either as careers, either as businesses, you're building that under an industry, you're building that within a country, and so on. Okay. And if you don't get to understand, because the main theme that we have been focusing on in the last 1 month have been on how to leverage golden opportunities. And I added this topic because there are some golden opportunities that will come into your life and they will require you to understand how power works. It could be power in terms of political power, industry power, power in corporate boardrooms, and so on. And with the work I do, I get to come across people that they don't understand how power gets to work right. I will get to talk to people and they'll talk about how they lost an important contract. When I start probing and talking with them, I begin to understand that you did not lose this contract, you know, because of either lack of particular certain set of skills, but you lost this contract because you did not understand how the game of power was being played as far as this corporate organization is concerned, or this corporate boardroom is concerned, or even if you are dealing with a national thing, you did not understand how power was being played at that particular level. Okay, so understanding how power moves and how power works and how you can leverage it as a builder, because this is basically an exclusive community of people who are either building something as entrepreneurs or as social enterprise owners, or most people here are leaders and directors in different institutions. So it is a game that you have to understand. And like I always fondly say, if you are somebody that you have made up your mind that as a person, you want to break the average lifestyle, you want to go beyond the kind of person that you just want to, maybe, let me say, get married, have a good car, have a house, and then you begin to think that you have made it. No, this session is good for people that you have made up your mind that you are a disruptor, you are a builder, you are somebody who want to bring that bigger transformation and impact and influence beyond just the average people, right? And if you're going to do that, you have to understand how this game of power works in terms of what you do. And before we talk about how power moves across industries and across nations and even the society as a whole, and how you can begin to leverage this for your building and for your result manifestation, I just added this part like in the last few minutes where I want to talk about the various types of power or the various ways that you can gain power. I didn't plan to talk about this because I wanted to assume that, you know, people may know, but I felt that I should talk about this first before I now talk about how power moves across industries and of course what you can begin to do. So let us talk about how you can gain power, right? And when I talk about power here, I'm talking about power in the sense of you gaining power not for your personal reasons or egoistic reasons or to roll over people, but in terms of how do you use power to serve? How do you use power to advance destiny? How do you use power to be a person of impact and create that positive change through the business you're building, through your social enterprise? And when I say social enterprise, I'm talking about NGOs, nonprofits, associations, community organizations, and so on, right? How do you do that? And I want to talk about, and I would like to, I would do my best to use different things that we can become partakers of. And I'll do my best to give examples of how this works, right? So, how do you become a powerful person in your industry? How do you become a powerful person in your nation? You see, because you don't, like I was teaching yesterday in another community, and I said that you can suddenly become popular, but you can never suddenly become a person of authority. You see, you can literally, let's say a young lady can literally post a half naked picture right now and gain thousands of likes and comments and become very popular in 48 hours or 5 days. And after 5 days, she's gone. She cannot maintain that popularity because you need to keep doing certain things to be popular. And that's why you don't suddenly become a person of authority. You can suddenly become popular, but it will be for a very short time and it dies out. But authority compounds if you know how to do it and how to keep on doing it, right? So, how do you become powerful? It's important, right? And it's something that you have to study, understand, and pick a pathway that works for your industry and for your nation. Okay. And there are some very deep, insightful things that I cannot share on a public platform. I can just kind of share in private, exclusive meetings, but I'll do my best to explain this. Okay. So, how do you become powerful? Now, there are different ways that I like to study. One thing I love doing is that I like to go like 500 years backward, 200 years backward to look at how the people in various generations do things. And I compare with people in this generation. And sometimes I try to anticipate how the future will look like. Like, so what I'm about to share with you is from kind of history perspective and the present and what may begin to happen in the next few years as the world begins to evolve, right? But how do you become powerful? I'm going to share with you different ways that you can pick one and decide, okay, this is what works for me based on my personality, based on the work I do, and based on the country where I am based, or even the continent where I'm based, right? And I would try to talk about how some people got to power that is not ethical, but it's not for you to practice it. It's for you to know that as you are also pushing to become a person of power, somebody can use unethical means, right, to get you outside of power. And if you understand how the various ways people get to power is concerned and do the right way, but you understand the unethical ways, you can begin to guard yourself. Why? Because when you see an unguarded leader, an unguarded executive, an unguarded entrepreneur, it's because they are ignorant or they are unaware of how certain things get to work. Okay. So, how do you become a powerful person? Number one, let me start with unethical ways. Number one, seize the power, right? Seize the power. This is where You forcefully take power, right? And many times in a corporate setting, it is through disruption. In a political setting, they call it coup d'etat, right? So it looks like military coups, hostile takeovers, revolutions, public overthrow, or you just create something with the purpose of I'm going to unseat the current person, especially in a corporate setting, right? If you look like in the African setting, um, somebody you see people in like in Burkina Faso or different countries from last 100 years or so, you see that different leaders seize power via military revolution, some for good reasons, some for bad reasons, right? If you have studied the story of Steve Jobs, you see that at some point when he was sent out of Apple, he was able to seize back control of Apple after being ousted of that particular company. So you can, and the point is, when it comes to seizing power, it is very fast, but very fragile. And why do I say it's fragile? Because if you seize power without the right systems, that power is going to collapse, right? That's why if you see, like I've read a few books on coup d'etat, and if you see a military general who did a coup d'etat on another general or another president and it collapsed, one major factor was that they did the coup and they succeeded, but they did not have the system to maintain the power. That's why I said that if you if somebody is using the method of seizing power, it happens so fast, it's a faster route, but it is also very dangerous. And if you don't have the right systems around you, that power is going to collapse upon you, right? And it's the same in a corporate setting. Like I've been in a corporate world for a while, and you see people desiring to be directors, supervisors, CEOs, or taking over positions in different departments or different organizations. And they will tell lies about people and eventually get the power. But the department literally collapse on them because they don't have either the right systems to run that department or to even run the entire organization, right? So the route of seizing power is fast, but it's very fragile. And without the right systems and the right structures, trust me, it will always collapse, right? I don't want to go deeper into this because it can get very sensitive. All right, number two, what is the second way that you can become powerful? And I will still give examples. Here we can talk about inherited power. You can inherit power, right? This is where power can be passed down to you or to somebody through legacy, through bloodlines because you're a member of a particular family, or through what you can call organizational succession. So there are some companies that are so good that they have created a good succession plan that they begin to mold and build somebody to inherit power if the main guy is no longer there, right? And this kind of inherited power, if you're somebody who studied monarchies and empires, you begin to notice that this is how people in monarchies get into power. Monarchies, dynasties, family-owned businesses. In some countries, political grooming, where they groom some people into that position, right? So inherited power is another pathway that you can become a powerful person, but it is kind of exclusive if you are not within these structures that you are a partaker of a legacy or you are a partaker of a monarchy, a particular bloodline, a dynasty, a family owned business, or you are if you are not in the inner circle of a political party where you can be so good that they can groom you to take over a position, you will not be a partaker of this. But you need to know that that is how it works, right? So, like sometimes, due to some things that I get exposed to, sometimes I can follow elections for a country, and I always say that the popular person will not win because I can see patterns and things. I say, look, the popular person is not going to win because many people have been groomed by a whole system to take over whether somebody is popular or not. It's a whole game of politics, right? So if you study, let me give, how many of you know about North Korea, right? The Kim Jong-un families and things like that, right? That is an example of both political grooming and kind of a dynasty at work. If you are versed with the American politics, you can study families like the Bush family and the Kennedy families in the US politics, right? They are very good at, making sure that somebody, a child in their family, can always grow into a political office, Senate, things like that. It's a structure of creating inherited power structure. And this is also important to the younger people here who are building stuff where you can begin to, you know, how can you create a structure in your family line where your people, your kids can be able to inherit power in the right way, right? You get the perspective. Okay. In the business setting, this is where business empires are passed down generationally, right? Again, it's very, very powerful in the US market, in Asia, in the Asian market, and some European countries are so good at this also. But if we look at the US market, look like Walmart, right? For those who are versus the American market, Walmart was founded by Sam Walton in 1962, but Walmart is still existing today, and and the Walton family still manages a significant portion of the company's equity. An example of inherited economic power, right? If you want to talk about, I like the RD story. RD is a global, supermarket chain that was founded, I think, in the 1940s or so. But till today, RD as a company is still 100% owned by the Albrecht family. That's the name of that family, right? So inherited power thrives on continuity, right? Good governance structure. And the challenge with this kind of power is that when many people inherit the power, they maintain what used to be there instead of bringing innovation, right? But for those who are smart enough, when you take over, you can bring innovation. But that's one pathway that you can gain power. So if you're here or you're following on YouTube and anywhere, and you are in this kind of family, now this is one way that it can work for you. Now, number three, the third way that you can become a powerful person, and this one can work for a good number of people because I have seen it work over and over and over, right? And I'm going to explain. It's called invited power. I call it invited power, and I'm going to explain. I'm going to explain invited power. What does that mean? Invited power means that this is where you can be granted success by not success, access. You can be granted access by those in control, either because they trust you or because of the leverage that you have or because of the usefulness or the essentialness that you bring to the table, right? Sometimes I always call this expertise power, right? Let me say it again. So, and most people here, if you come from, you know, let's say you cannot inherit power, you cannot seize power, you are from a struggling family per se, what they call humble beginnings and things like that. One thing that can work for you is invited power. I can give many examples of people that have grown into place of power and authority from very humble beginnings, poor families, no, a family that had no power at all. But because either the way they served somebody and they gain the person's trust, or because they have something that becomes a leverage, a force that they can leverage and be invited into a particular circle, or you become so useful, you command a high level of experts that people who command like the top 1% in a particular industry or political party or nation, they have no choice than to just invite you in their power circle. You get the concept? That's why I call it invited power. That means there is something you have. There is something you have that the people who truly control the power, they have no choice than to invite you into their circle. That's why I call it invited power, and sometimes I call it expertise power. You just command a certain dimension of expertise that by by default they say, you know what, this guy is not one of us. He's from a poor family. He doesn't have what people like us have. But trust me, if we don't get him, we're gonna fail. right? That's the concept, invited power, right? So this often looks like, strategic appointments, strategic endorsements, right? Or they just kind of, you're so good at something that they just appoint you as a private advisor or a consultant or something like that. But they invite you into their circle of power. If you're somebody, what somebody who enjoyed this was the current president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, right? He was invited by his mentor, Yeltsin, if I pronounce it well, but I'm not a Russian, right? But Yeltsin, right? And he was invited by him into their inner circle. That means when you study Putin's rise to power, it was significantly influenced by his connection to this guy, Boris Yeltsin, right? And because Putin at the time, he was just a former KGB officer, like a former CIA officer or a former special police officer. That was what he was at the time. But Boris was the president at the time, and due to he knew Putin from what he was doing, and he noticed that Putin was a very loyal person and a very trustworthy person. And another expert who wrote a book around this said that Putin was invited into the inner circle because they saw that he was very loyal, very trustworthy, and he was also irrelevant. He was not popular. So they saw him as somebody that they could control, and then they invited him into power, right? But he had something. He had something that they wanted. He had loyalty. He had trust. And maybe because of his military background, they said, okay, he has things that can benefit us as far as we are concerned as a small inner circle of powerful political leaders. You see, but that is how invited power works, right? Same as in, let's say, in a corporate setting, you are just new or you are in the bottom level of a company, but you can train yourself to become so good at sales, so good at marketing, or so good at software development that the people in the boardroom at the top of your company, they have no choice than to invite you into that level of power, invited power, right? It is soft entry power, and it is very stable because you are bringing in something that the more you are delivering it, you're in power, right? And most people underestimate this pathway to power, but it works. You see, I always found this that personally for me, due to my family that I come from and let's say the village I come from, there are some rooms I've sat in not because I don't deserve it, right? Based on where I'm coming from and my background, I don't have the right to be in those rooms, but I've sat in those rooms. The only reason was that they wanted my expertise. As simple as that. That's the only reason. You see, so invited power is a good pathway for people that you have no godfather, no godmother. You actually have no idea on how you can get to the top, but you can decide that pick an industry, pick a pathway, pick a job, pick a process, whatever, and pay the price. I am going to become so good at that I'll begin to attract people in power who need my expertise. They will have no option than to invite me into their circle. Is this shifting something? I just thought I should share on pathways to power before I talk on how power moves in industries and nations. Is it hitting something on your head? Let me know. Are you learning something? Type yes in the chat box. For those who are here on Zoom, type yes. Give me some feedback. Give me some feedback. I know this is not kind of a popular training that some people may like, this sounds like physics to me. Right? That's fine. If you want to go to the top, you need to learn things like this. Trust me. All right. All right. Good. Good. Thank you for the feedback on Zoom. And all right. All right. Somebody says I'm still trying to understand. Okay. Don't bother. You will watch again. This is the kind of teaching that you don't watch once. You need to go through over and over and over and over. Like I always say, sometimes I am taking years of research and studies and practice to teach in 1, 2 hours, right? So you cannot understand 10 years or 5 years of studies and research in 1 hour or in one sitting. You need to go through again and again to get it right. Okay, good. Let's look at the next pathway on how to become a powerful person. It's a bit linked to invited power, but I prefer to separate it, right? I like to call it built power or developed power. I'm going to explain. Built power or developed power. This is also a pathway to becoming a person of power that almost anybody can do it if you're willing to pay the price to practice it, right? Now, what does build power mean? I have seen it happen over and over, and especially like in the last 30 years or so, not too long. Let me say 20 years or so. And this is a kind of power where you as a person, you spend time to create value or influence or develop public trust, right? It is created over time. It is almost related to invited power. But this is a path where you spend some time to create a body of value or to build influence intentionally on your path, or you build public trust. And this kind of power is more popular now because of the advent of social media, right? So that is why, like, this works a lot for people in entrepreneurship, people who can create movements or leadership movements, brand building. If you're good at leveraging social media platforms to build a brand, or you're good at creating content that makes sense and attracts people, then you can practice build power. It can give you access into power. Somebody who this worked for so well is Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk, his access, he grew into power from humble beginnings by building his way into power. That's what he did. He built his way into, he now commands both economic power and political power, not just even in one country, right? So he created his way into power through a body of value creation, right? And then he started using that value creation to build influence and to build public trust. And now, because of that dimension, he commands some level of power across boards and across different continents, right? Building Tesla, SpaceX, you know, things like PayPal from ground zero, basically, it gave him some level of power. You see, and almost anybody can get into power through this. It requires some hard work, strategic thinking, long-term thinking, and so on. But it works. It works if you do it with a plan. And people who practice build power, they have a long-term game. You don't just wake up, they don't stumble into power and influence. No, they play a long-term game. Now, okay, you know what? Give me 30 years, give me 10 years, give me 15 years. I'm going to wield this dimension of power because I have a plan. And my plan is I'm going to build my way into power. You see, but now in this generation, it is much easier than 50 years ago, 100 years ago, to build your way into power because of the advent of social media. You see, for example, we have seen actors, comedians, musicians dining with presidents. You see, through content creation, through branding and delivering value entertainment, they built their way into having some ears in political corridors. You get the perspective. So you need to understand, is it something that you can begin to do? Right? Somebody like Nelson Mandela, another type of power, he used it, but he also used this part where, you know, he built moral authority while being in prison. Like when you choose to stay in prison because you believe in what you're fighting for, it's like building your way into power while being in prison, right? And this kind of pathway is kind of slow, but it is like unshakable, it is stable, and it runs deep. It runs deep. People who build their ways into power, you cannot just pull them down anyhow. No, because they have spent years building their road so deep that you cannot just shake them off like that. No, because they have created their own systems, they have created their own structures, they have created their own pathways. So they have built themselves literally into power. Literally, without you or with you, they are fine. That's what I'm saying. Let's go back to Elon Musk, right? Without presidents, without senators, without whoever, the guy is still going to be fine, right? Because he built his way into it, and the private sector is still his major playboard, right? So if you're a business person, you are a leader here, whatever, you can begin to think of that particular pathway. Again, like I said, if this pathway is going to work for you, you must be comfortable at being a long range thinker. Okay, being a long range thinker is going to help you. Next is what I like to call extracted power. It's another pathway to building, you know, becoming a powerful person. Extracted power. Now, this concept talks about it's kind of it is used a lot in the political scene, and some governments use against governments. I'm going to end there, right? But it's extracted power. You pull this kind of power from a system, from a person, from an institution. It mostly works through a lot of manipulation, a lot of seduction, a lot of leverage, right? I actually learned, I started digging deep into this through the story of Samson, right? Samson and Delilah. Delilah extracted Samson's power, right? So extracted power and literally gave Samson to the other people, and he ended up dying in the whole process, right? So Delilah extracted Samson's secret, and thereby through that whole system, he died, right? So that's an example of extracted power, and that's this where spies come in, where governments send spies to other governments, where corporate companies send spies to other corporate companies and things like that. This is where blackmail comes in. They use blackmail to extract power. This is where cultural extraction comes in, creating a system for economic dependency, right? Like for example, they use this a lot in Africa, where the structures they have created is for Africa to keep depending on the West, and things like that is part of this kind of model that is at work, right? So extracted power, right? This is also working a lot with social media platforms, where social media companies are extracting data from you and then using that data to control your behavior. It has been proven. It's a proven research, right? That is why many people are addicted to social media. That's why when you pick up your phone, you cannot stop. The algorithms, every like you do, every comment you do, they're extracting power from you and then controlling you the more. That's why they'll keep making sure that the type of post that you see, the type of people the type of videos that you see are the videos that you will keep liking and keep being addicted to. Is this extraction power working? They extract your habits, they extract the things that you like from you, and they use it at the same time to control you by designing the algorithms to push things to you that you'll be addicted to following and addicted to liking. That's how extracted power works. Okay? So the extracted power is parasitic, it's a parasite. It robs others of their enriched self and kind of prosperity. Like I said, blackmail works here, right? Seduction works here. We have seen great men in history pulled down by women, right? So it's a way to power. It's a way to pull down another person and rise to power. It's unethical, but people still use it. So as I said, I will share both ethical and unethical so that you know what they can use against you and be guarded, because you cannot claim to be an executive, a leader, an entrepreneur, and be unguarded. And unguardedness is always as a result of ignorance or unawareness or being unaware of what can or cannot be used against you. Okay? Now, the fourth, is it the fourth or the fifth? Is it the fifth way? Comment in the chat box. Is it number 5 for those who are writing? I hope you are getting these points. These are things that, trust me, you will not hear on a popular platform. right? You will not hear on an average platform. But these are things you have to know. If you're a person that you know that what you're called to do, what you're currently doing is going to take you to a place of influence, please, these are things that you cannot be ignorant about. Okay. But if you are a comfortable person where all you want to do, you want to do is eat well, smile, comment on Facebook, on social media platforms, and think that you're living well, then it's not for you. But if you're a game changer, you feel that you're supposed to make a name in your generation for the good of the society, then this is for you. Okay? All right. So the next one is what I call absorbed power. Absorbed power, right? What does absorbed power means? Absorbed power. This is power that you can gain by assimilating someone else's influence, assimilating someone else's network or identity after their collapse or exit. That's why I call it absorbed power, right? You gain, you become a person of power, or you become powerful because somebody has left the stage, or somebody, you know, is no longer interested in whatever they were doing. Or let's say you were an assistant, right? You at that point you enjoy, it's kind of related to succession, pathway, but I'll explain why I call it absorbed power. But you gain, but this is where you don't succeed because a system orchestrates that you succeed. No, this is where you also take over power because you strategically saw an opportunity. You did not literally orchestrate, although others make it, although others can orchestrate for somebody to leave power, exit, or something happens so they can take over. But in an ethical way, you did not create the situation for the person to leave power. But because you are strategic, because you are an elite thinker and executioner, you can gain that power by assimilating someone else's influence, network, and position, and identity after their exit or after they leave that position. And to do it ethically, you don't only take over the position, but the influence that the person was wielding, the kind of loyalty the person had, you also absorb that loyalty. Then you did it very well. Because it's possible to absorb a position without absorbing the loyalty that is attached to that position. But if you're going to use absorbed power, you have to do it ethically and the right way, where you don't only absorb the position, you also absorb the loyalty that is attached to that particular position. So you absorb the influence, the network, the identity, just beyond, position and resources. Okay. So this is where, and for you to be good at practicing absorbed power, you need to master the art of positioning yourself as a neutral continuation after someone else, after someone leaves the position, or their downfall or their collapse. Because somebody can, you know, fall in a position because they're incompetent, or because a situation came and they could not handle. But you cannot position yourself to absorb that position and every other thing like network, influence, identity, resources, and whatever, and do it better than them. Okay. So, like I said, if you're practicing absorbed power, you are not just inheriting authority or the position. No, you are inheriting the loyalty attached to the position. You are inheriting the trust. You are also inheriting the influence attached to that particular position. That's the power of this, right? And if you are going to absorb power the right way, it will always require high emotional intelligence, strategy, and perfect timing, right? You must have the right emotional intelligence, you must have a strategy, and you must practice elite timing, right? So, somebody who enjoyed absorbed power, I always refer to the Bible because it's one of my main texts that I read a lot as a Christian, as a believer. Now, somebody who enjoyed absorbed power was Joshua. If you look at Joshua and Moses, after they were almost done with the wilderness and about to enter the promised land, and of course, due to the jaga jaga that happened between God and Moses, God said that Moses will not enter the promised land, so he had to transfer power. But you see, that was Moses' exit from a powerful position. Joshua did not cause him to lose the position, but Joshua was positioned to absorb that position, absorb the authority, absorb the influence, absorb the loyalty of the people, and even absorb the support of God in that position. You get the perspective. So that's a good example of absorbed power, because you are just there at the right time, well positioned. You had the skills, the experience, the knowledge, and when there was an exit, you took over, right? So power wasn't seized. No, it was absorbed via either proximity. Joshua was close to Moses, proximity. You cannot, and one thing with absorb power is that you cannot absorb it if you don't have some level of proximity or closeness to the main person. And number two, one thing that can make absorbed power to work is the continuity of the mission. Like when Joshua took over, he continued the mission of making sure that the children of Israel can advance to their promised land. You get the perspective. Now, let me take you to the business world, right? One of my favorite stories to talk about. How many of you use BlackBerry? Gen Z will not understand, right? But in the days of BlackBerry, right? BlackBerry, what happened to BlackBerry? Apple came out of nowhere and took over the market, right? So that's another example of absorbed power, right? So Apple, after BlackBerry's decline, Apple did not destroy BlackBerry per se. No. What they did was they just created a better product, positioned themselves, and then they absorbed the market trust and the user habit, and they won the market, right? Samsung also benefited from this to a certain extent. But in the American market, this was the game that happened. It's an example of absorbed power. Somebody's declining, like BlackBerry was declining at the time. And what Apple did was that Apple just created a better product, did better positioning, better marketing, created better features, and so on. And the timing was perfect. I said, if you're going to practice absorb power, you must be good at elite timing. So the timing was perfect when they launched the different products and they absorbed the market trust, the user habits, and so much more. Right? So absorbed power doesn't fight. No, if you're fighting, if you're trying to use absorb power and fighting, no, you're trying to do a coup d'etat, right? Absorb power doesn't fight. No, you just position yourself and fill the vacuum the right way. You fill the spot that looks empty the right way, right? That's the power of this particular absorbed power model. Okay, so the next point, the next pathway to power is it number 7? Engineered power. Engineered power. Now, if you're going to use this pathway to become a powerful person, you must be good at creating systems. Yes. You must be good at designing a system or a machinery that power can flow through to you as a creator. That's why I call it engineered power, right? So you design platforms, you establish roles and infrastructures and so on that people must operate within. And the more they use that system, the more they use that machinery, the more they use whatever you have created, you become more powerful, right? Now, let me go more traditional to explain this and then come from the top down for better understanding. Because this kind of power is in the framework you have created, is in the system you have created. It's not about you being a figurehead. No. Here you are thinking in terms of creating a system that people must use. So the more they use that system, the more you become powerful. You are not interested in the spotlight, in being a figurehead, or so on. No, the more system that you have created, right? The more structure you have created, the more powerful you become, right? For example, you see, I read a private article. It's not, I don't think it was public yet. Somebody shared with me and was arguing that, somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, he's becoming very powerful. Why? He just created a system that people are using. And the more people use that system, the more it makes them powerful. For example, there are some families that if you go to in different countries, they will always respect those families because the people in those families either they were part of the committee that created the nation's constitution, or they created the national anthem or the flag, things like that. And those families are still respected, even though the people already died. Why? Because that is an example of engineered power. You created something, and the more they use that thing, or the more they use that system or that machine or that architecture, the more you become more powerful. Another kind of, it's like a myth, but it's a good example is, how many of you know this name, Satoshi Nakamoto? He is recognized or alleged as the person who created Bitcoin, right? I don't know if that is a final authority yet, but that is the name given to the person who created Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, right? He's a perfect example of engineered power. Like, he created Bitcoin and then disappeared. Yet his protocol, the framework, the system he created at the moment is rotating trillions of dollars throughout that ecosystem. Incredible power structure. Incredible power structure, right? So you create a system that the more people depend on and the more people use, the more you command that kind of power, right? Another person who did this in Asia so well is Alibaba. How many of you know, Jack Ma, who created Alibaba, right? Alibaba is a powerful, powerful platform, right? He created that. He literally built a platform that the economy of China literally depend upon and regulators depend upon. In the United States, you can talk about Amazon, right? Other things got him into power, but he has been able to successfully create a running system. Millions of people depend on the Amazon system every single day to literally live and have a better life, right? He literally engineered his way into power by creating a system or designing a system or building a machinery. And the more people use it, the more power flows to him as a person, right? So people can also use this. You can engineer your way to becoming a powerful person, okay? And one good thing I love about engineered power is that it always outlives the architect. Yes. For example, I spoke about the Constitution. People who developed constitutions created the flag of a nation, national anthem, and many other things. Many of those things outlive the people. But for especially historians, the more they use the flag or do that, they'll always mention the names of those people because they engineered their way into power. I always go back to the Bible, right? There's a woman in the Bible that poured oil on Jesus. And Jesus made a very important statement. Wherever this gospel will be preached, this woman's name will be mentioned. Engineered power, right? Based on a simple, like an action created a system. Let's put it that way, right? She was put into the system that anywhere that the gospel is being preached, that woman is being mentioned, per se. You see, so you can engineer your way into power by creating or designing something. And this can work at a large scale or at a small scale, right? If you are, let's say you are in an organization and you can create a framework, a system, a small chatbot, a small software platform, whatever, and it becomes so good that they will keep using it. right? And the more they use it, the more they recognize you as an expert as far as that platform is concerned, and the more power comes to you. Although in settings like that, they will do their best to minimize your input because of internal politics or whatever, but whatever, whether they like it or not, you still wield some level of power because of what you created, and the system is actually working. Lastly, and then I'm done with how to access power, is symbolic power. Symbolic power. Symbolic power, it happens a lot in movements, in traditional settings, but due to social media, symbolic power is becoming very, very, very popular. Although many people are not yet using it because either they don't understand it. But when I explain it, I bet you that many of you here that you will decide that, oh, I think this is a pathway I should use to become a powerful person because it works, right? Now, the best way to experience the pathway to becoming a powerful person by using symbolic power is is to is to is to share in a way that you become a person of power through this model by deriving power when you represent an ideal, when you represent a concept or a movement. So you pick an ideal, you pick a concept, you pick a movement, and then you push that movement, you push that ideal, you push that concept, you populate it. And the more you do it consistently, the more you begin to gain power. Not because you are truly powerful like other ways, no, but because you represent an ideal, you represent a symbol, right? So people now by force gives you attention, they give you perception, they give you so much more, and you just become a powerful person. Why? Because you represent a symbol, an ideal, a concept, a movement. So you literally become a walking embodiment of a vision, of maybe a memory of a great man, or a movement, or a moral authority, right? And in this case, others project power onto you, even if you don't seek the power. No, because of the symbolic power that you now represent, they will project power to you. Even if you don't seek the power, no, they will project it to you. Why? Because you represent an ideal, you represent a movement, you represent a concept, right? And literally, people who have symbolic power, they literally become untouchable. Why? Because when you attack that person, you are attacking a belief system. You are attacking an idea. You are attacking a people who believe in a movement. So symbolic power is a powerful pathway to becoming a person of power and authority. So, but for you to do this, you must pick an ideal, you must pick a concept, you must pick a movement, you must pick, you know, it could be a myth or whatever, a vision, and then you push it, you push it. So, for example, we have seen people that have become powerful because they decided that, you know what, I'm going to push the feminism movement. For example, we have seen people have become powerful because they said, I'm going to push the peace movement, right? And under this, somebody who benefited from this also is Nelson Mandela, right? He was imprisoned, yet he held a more symbolic power than many South African presidents after he left power. That's a good example of symbolic power, right? After he left power, Nelson Mandela was still more powerful, more influential than many South African presidents who came after him. Why? Because because of the movement that he represented, because of the ideals that he represented. The whole nation, basically, and the whole world projected power to him without even him seeking for it. He just needed to represent and stand for an ideal. You see? So there's this There's this young lady that was very popular in the 2017s and 18s. Those in Europe may know her if you follow global politics. Her name is Greta Thunberg. At the time, she was just in secondary school and basically around 14, 15, 16 years. So, what made her powerful? Like she was interviewed by top news medias around the world, went to the United Nations, met presidents. Like she was very popular and influential. But how did her influence and popularity and authority start? What this young lady known as Greta Thunberg, go and research about her. You will learn a lot from her journey. She became a symbol of what you can call youth climate advocacy. So she started advocating for young people to be involved in climate change issues, right? And she went ahead to begin to encourage her schoolmates and other schools around Europe and Germany, I think in particular, to begin to strike or boycott school to protest against climate inaction. So she picked an ideal, she picked a concept, she picked a movement and started promoting it. And the more she was promoting it, the more students were leaving school and protesting on the street against, climate inaction. The leaders, the movement now skyrocketed to more nations across the world and different cities and so on. And that is how she became very influential. Until today, she's still a voice as far as the climate change industry is concerned. A symbolic power. Good example of rising into power in just kind of a few months or a few years because you pick an ideal, you pick a concept, and you say, you know what, I am going to spend the rest of my life promoting this ideal and this concept. And if you do it right, you push it the right way, you will start sitting in rooms that without that movement, you'll be a nobody. Without that concept, you'll be a nobody. Nobody will hear your voice. But you now have a voice in your generation because there is a movement, there's an ideal, and there's a concept that you represent. Another way that symbolic power works is like across many African nations have chiefs and fawns and traditional rulers, right? Like I'm from the Sort tribe, right? If you want to see how some real sort men and women are going to react to you, speak against the phone sort, right? There is a dimension of power that we as the people of sort project into him because he represents a culture, he represents a people, he represents a movement and an ideal that is, how do I put it, it's more powerful. There was a time I was in Kumu by then, and something spectacular happened where I've forgotten what happened that day or during that week. And the SDO gave an order that nobody should do this or do that. And trust me, many young people did not listen. That means they did not listen to the government representative or the main official in that division at the time. But something happened. The young people now marched to the palace and they made the phone, and the phone gave almost the same instruction, and the young people respected. Why did they respect him? You see, the young people prefer to respect that power than the administrative power because he represents them. He represents a culture, a tradition, a people, a movement that it is more profound and more powerful to them or to us as a people than somebody who sits as a government official. You see, so you can also rise into power by using the pathway of, picking a concept, a movement, an ideal or an idea and representing it. It becomes symbolic power to you. Okay, so These are some of the various ways that there are some that they are not good for public consumption. Trust me, they are good for more private strategy sessions. But if you practice this, right? Again, like I said, this session is not for those who are comfortable at being, how do we put it? Uh, uh, um, Average people. But if what you're building, if what you're doing in your generation, in your time, in your industry is something that you desire to wield some influence and authority and produce some transformational results, then you have to understand the game of power. Okay, that's why today's session was focused on how power moves in industries and nations and the society as a whole, because many people don't know how it moves. But I felt that if I jump straight into how power moves and assume that people know the various pathways to power, I may be doing a disservice to many people. Right now, let me do a quick survey. Have you picked one way that you can practice as a person to become a person of power? Type yes in the chat box. If you have picked one way that works for that, you think that this works for me, type yes in the chat box. Give me some feedback. Did this make sense to you? Now, this kind of session sometimes makes sense to exclusive communities, right? But of course, many people here are leaders, entrepreneurs, professionals, executives, and so on, right? So, did it make sense to you? All right, I'm happy to see the feedback that there are things that you think that you can pick and begin to practice. Right. Somebody says my head is exploding. You have never heard that before. All right. That's what happens when you are around me. All right. Let me, so we're not going to do a lot today in terms of how power moves, right? Because the talking on the pathway to power, so you've taken more than 1 hour to talk about that. But next Thursday, don't miss it. I'll spend some time now to talk about how power moves across industries, across nations, and even globally. Because I'm telling you, there are things that when you know, you can plan your destiny well and your life very well. And one of them is this game of power. Like I've shared these pathways to power. Many people are hearing this for the first time today, right? And this information should help you now be able to plan a better pathway as far as your destiny is concerned. Like you are no longer just doing, like we say in Bamenda, to moon boss Calabar, right? You're not just trying, hoping that something will work, right? I always say that people like that end up being failures. But there are things that when you know, right? When you know, it helps you very, very well. All right. So just a few thoughts on how power moves, and then we will continue next week is that one thing I always encourage people, especially when I'm providing private consultations and coaching, is that I always like to teach people at that level to understand how power hides in unseen structures and not public noise. You see, if you are going to understand how power moves in your industry and in your nation, you have to train your eyes, the eyes of your mind, of course, your brain, to begin to understand how power hides in unseen structures and not public noise. You see, because the people that shape the outcomes of an industry, the people that shape the outcomes of a nation, they are always behind the curtains. They are always behind the noise. Always behind the noise. The real power brokers are always behind the noise. And if you are a builder in an industry, you are a builder in a nation, you have to pay the price to understand how is power hiding and what are the unseen structures or individuals or systems in my industry, in my nation where power hides, and how can I leverage that for my rising or for my building, right? Like I always say, for example, If you want to understand how power moves in a political setting, forget the noisemakers, forget those who stand for presidency. Those are not the real power brokers. Study those who are funding the presidency. Study those who are framing the policies behind the presidency. Study those who decide who will go through the primaries and eventually stand for presidential elections. Those are the real power movers in the political scene. Every president is a figurehead, trust me. You're just a noisemaker somewhere, a figurehead. I cannot say more than that, but for those who know and those who know, those are figureheads people. The real people, if you find who funded this guy to become a president, who designed the policy this guy is running on, who filtered this guy and made sure that he stands for the primaries to eventually stand for final elections. If you find the people and let me tell you something, the people who do these three things, they are very secretive. You can hardly know them except by insider information. Those are the real powerful people. And that's where real power hides in unseen structures, unseen people, unseen systems. So, as you're growing, for those who are in that level, don't chase the noise. No, I always say don't chase the noise. Follow the architecture. I was providing a consultation to a guy who runs a company into contracts, and I said, okay, what do you know is good? These people are good. I want to let us follow. Tell me, who are the real movers in this company? The guy did not know. He said, no, look, you are following the noise. Follow the architecture. Follow the power that is hiding behind the figurehead. If you get it right, you will always get the contracts in this company. Okay? So it is very, very important to understand this game. Okay? And one thing about power is that power rarely announces itself. Okay? Power rarely announces itself because it always moves in shadows and proxies. Sometimes you want to get close to a powerful person. Instead of focusing on the powerful person, focus on the people who have more proximity to the person. Because power moves a lot in shadows and proxies. You see, sometimes I was telling somebody, look, stop targeting that person. Buy a gift for the secretary. Simple counsel. Forget the main power. Buy a gift for the secretary. And I guarantee you, in less than 4 weeks, you'll meet the main guy. And it happened exactly as I said. Why? Because I understand that power moves through shadows and proxies. Okay? That's why I said that you need to understand that power hides in unseen structures. It's not public power. Power is never in public noise. Because real influence, real power always hides behind loud personalities. Right? It hides behind loud personalities. You see? So if you understand that the real power brokers rarely hold titles, it will shift how you do business and how you build things as a builder. Superficial people and immature people focus on people who hold titles. No. If you have matured and you have deeper understanding and deeper wisdom, you look beyond the title holder. There is somebody else that if you understand how to work with that person, you will advance in whatever you're doing. Okay? So sometimes you can begin to study who is the gatekeeper. Don't focus on the elected leader. No, who is the gatekeeper? I would say, for example, like in for powerful people and people who are leading movements and different things who are married. Sometimes the gatekeeper is the wife. If you get in the good books of the wife, you will get the oga kwata before you know it, right? So sometimes these gatekeepers are not loud. They are not in the public face, but they are the real people. You see, is the public person powerful? Of course, but there's also real power that some people command, and that power moves across unseen structures and not public noise. Okay, so that is point one on understanding how power moves after laying that foundation, the pathways to power. Now, next week, I'm going to share with us five different things that you must understand on how power moves across industries in your nation. And these are things that they cut across every nation basically. And then you can pick them now and begin to contextualize based on where you are and your industries. And if you practice it, you always create a shift in whatever you are building. All right. I can take questions and then we are done with our master class for today. If you have questions, type in the chat box or leave me a comment if you're following on YouTube and we are good to go. Any questions? Go ahead. And while questions are coming, give me some feedback. If this shifted what you're building forever, type yes in the chat box. I like to shift people for their lifetime when they hear me talk. If this shifted something forever in what you're building, type yes in the chat box. Yes, yes, I love to see that. I love to see that. Good. Senior love, that's not a complaint. Mm? That your complaint, you can there are people that have come from worse places than you and they have made it in life, right? So if you're learning the things that I share, if you have been learning from me for 3 years, trust me, this should never be one of your complaints again, my brother. Because there are things that when you know it eclipses your background. It eclipses your background for good. Okay. So you can no longer use the complaint that you desire to attain a certain level of power in your industry and that you're starting life from scratch. You have no mother, no father to rely on. No, babies rely on people. Please, if you're going to stand out in your generation, please don't build anything relying on an individual. No, this is a recipe to fail and to be controlled by people. It's not a valid complaint, trust me. Okay. The valid complaint would be that I have done this, I have studied this, I've tried this, I've practiced this, and I'm still failing. Then I can say that you know what, you truly need help. But if you are here and you're still complaining that you are not succeeding, you're not rising because you don't have a father to rely on, a mother to rely on, and this to rely on, trust me, your problem is maturity. Your problem is you have not decided to mature and decided to do what others are not willing to do. Okay. So it's no longer an excuse. It's just kind of looking for pity in a certain way. But if you shift from that perspective into responsibility, you're going to do more beyond what you think. And the problem with trying to build anything and having the consciousness that I am not able to go this far in life because I don't have somebody to rely on. It limits you in ways that you will never imagine. But if let me tell you, if you build your life with a consciousness that nobody is coming to help you from anywhere, oh my goodness, you will achieve more because you'll be a barrier breaker. Because and you walk. That is why have you noticed that research has proven that those who come from very poor families get to rise very fast and become very successful. I'm reading a book now. I think they indicated in that book that just about 9% of people who inherit wealth end up being successful in life because they don't know how to work hard. They don't know how to strategize. They don't know the pain. They don't know responsibility. They don't know resilience. They don't know many things. But when you come from a poor background, there are many things that you learn that you can begin to wield in your journey of success that an average person cannot do because you are building with a mindset that look, there's no plan B, there's no plan C. I have only plan A, and my plan A is I have to make it. If I choose plan B, I'm going back to poverty. If I choose plan C, I'm going back to become a nobody. So I have only plan A. I have only plan A. And the plan A is nobody's coming to help me and I'm going to make it. Okay? All right. Let me see if there are questions here. Hey, is somebody a spirit of power? Or can someone get into dimension of power from a leader who passed away? That is now spiritism. Right? That is now spiritism. And this is also one thing that they use to condition people to think small. Like people, you don't understand that you have your own power. Why will you go look at somebody's power who is dead already? If that person could harness their own potential and power and grow to that level, why do you keep thinking that? And this is why many Africans are kept in bondage by religion. They don't understand the difference between religiosity and spirituality. Why do you have your own spirit, you have your own mind and everything? Why are you thinking of, I can only become powerful by catching the spirit of somebody who is dead? Why do you like dead things? Why are you alive and thinking about dead things? And why can't it's religiosity? It's religious slavery. It's how do I put it? Yes, religious slavery, right? And it keeps people in bondage for long. People are not doing big things because they're like, I can only get the like in the religious circle, I can only get the mantle of this or the this of this before I start doing this. That's absolute nonsense. You have God in you as a Christian, you have the Holy Spirit in you, and you're looking for somebody's mantle who is dead and gone. Oh, come on, right? That's religious slavery. Okay. With order, you have not harnessed your own mind self. You are thinking of somebody's spirit somewhere or somebody's mantle somewhere. Your own mind, you have not put it to use to the full possible best, right? And this happens a lot. You hear this kind of talks a lot just in Africa, in the African setting. Okay? So shift your perspective. You don't need somebody who is dead with his dead spirit to become successful and shift your generation. You need to develop yourself in partnership with God and become a disruptor in your generation. Okay? Like they will say in a Christian setting. Why are you praying for Elijah's mantle, Elijah's spirit, and double portion? You have the Holy Spirit and you're praying for Elijah's spirit. What's wrong with some religious people? Right? Sorry, I'm sounding that way because that those kind of questions come from church setting background. Okay. Talking about these various methods of power acquisition, what is the role of the economy as a whole to shaping it? How can everything I was talking about was about the economy, right? Everything I was talking about. You see, there's no politics depend on the economy. That's why people who decide who sit on presidency are always money people. Everything I spoke about is on the economy. Okay, it's on the economy. So if everything I talk about related to the economy of the country where you are, okay, because if you are building systems, you're building it on the whole economy, on the whole industry, and so on. Okay, so all those various methods, the pathway is through the economic system of the whole stuff. Okay, and politics, you see, there is no politics without. If you understand politics deeper, you see that politics is like 5% really politics, 95% economy. Right? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. Let me check if there are questions on YouTube and then we're good to go. So next week, we'll now spend a lot of time to begin to look at the 5 different ways that power moves across different industries, across different nations. and how you can begin to understand is for you to use it and enhance your power. There are many of you that your generation, your village, your community is if you become powerful today, you will liberate many from captivity, financial bondage, and many other things, right? And there are things that you cannot achieve without power. That's a fact. There are some changes that I was telling somebody, look, what you're talking about, you cannot achieve it if you don't get into politics. Stop running away from politics. Get into politics. All these things you're trying to do, you will keep being handicapped and you struggle if you don't make up your mind to be a politician. I told the person, it'll be impossible. Okay? So one challenge that some young people developed was that they painted politics to be so bad. It's not bad. It's a profession like every other profession. Just master the game. Is it ruthless? Yes. But you too can become ruthless if you know what to do. Right? So if it's a path that you feel that you're called into, you will have the wisdom, the ideas, and the perspective to play the game in that particular industry. All right? All right, people. See you all next week. For the men here, we are having, if you're a man here, please don't go, listen to me very, 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 very careful. So we are planning something big just for men, right? Just for men, just for men. So it is, let me see. We are planning something big just for the men. I want to look at, where is that flyer? Okay. So I first strongly led to do this, and I'm going to share the story why we are working on this. Okay. So we're calling it the Gentlemen of Impact, Influence, and Income Summit. Okay. If you know any man around you, if you know any man around you, please get them to partake of this. Ladies can participate, but when I'll be training on this and speaking on this, I am addressing every word I will say. I'm targeting the mindset, the heart, and the lifestyle of men. Yes, the lifestyle of men, so that we can hack into that masculinity, into that ego, into that courage, into the many things that men have as a gift that God has given them, and do mind-blowing things in their generation. Okay? So if you are seeing this and you are not in the gentlemen's club, we already have about close to, I think, 300. Let me check my phone. We already have about close to 300 or so men in the group, okay, from every nation. Okay, 220. That is good. The numbers keep rising. Okay, so if you're here and you are not in that community, please make sure that you join the Zoom, not the Zoom, the youth, the Facebook, not the Facebook, the WhatsApp group link. My mind is like 4 different ways. Okay. All right. So if you're a man, if you are here in this group right now, you're following on Facebook, on YouTube, and you are not a member of the gentlemen's WhatsApp group where we'll be dealing, well, if you're a man here and you're struggling with how do I become a man of impact, a man of influence, and a man of income in your generation, don't miss it, because I'll handle things that you will not see in common places. Okay. So be a partaker. If you're following this and you are not there, so you can send me a DM, a WhatsApp message, and I will happily send you the link to be a partaker of this event that starts next week. All right, people. God bless you all, and see you next week, Thursday masterclass. All right. All right. I'm not going to send the WhatsApp link here right now. Can you DM me on my WhatsApp number if you have it, you're in any of the groups, or Facebook, send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I will happily send you the link. Thank you so much. All right, people, see you next week.